And they believed that it was the moment that Jews took control. So when these people are opposed to the Federal Reserve, they're not opposed to a government per se. They're opposed to what they believe is Jewish control of the government. When they target and tell people that the Federal Reserve is unconstitutional, it's based on a specious reading of the Constitution.
And what about this, the whole role of the attitude toward Israel in general? Clearly, among many conservative white Christians, the support they strongly support the state of Israel, and yet you have this group of white nationalists who see Israel and the worldwide Jewish community as a threat to their lifestyle.
Well, in the book, I describe a moment in 1988 when Pat Robertson, the Reverend Pat Robertson, runs through the Republican primaries and excites the white Christian constituency into the Republican Party. And the Liberty Lobby at that point says, look, we disagree with the Reverend Robertson on the issue of the Federal Reserve, but mostly with his support for the State of Israel. So they use that as a line of demarcation between themselves and what we think of as the Christian right. These people have a thorough anti-Semitic conspiracy theory which separates them to some degree from the Christian right. On other issues, like opposition to abortion, trying to force women back into 17th century, quote, traditional roles, those kinds of issues, opposition to gay marriage, they support those issues. But on the issue of Israel, they think that the Christian right is wrong. So that's the core of the difference between the Christian right and the white nationalists. And I try and explore that in the book a little bit.
Leonard Zeskind, the issue of Holocaust denial, how this fits in, and then the link between the white supremacy, the racism of von Brunn, his connection to Noontide Press, leading Holocaust denial press, with the anti-abortion movement, the connection between the white nationalist movement and the anti-abortion movement.
Well, in the case of Holocaust denial, this is a rewriting of history that for some is simply, you know, a way to poke a stick into Jews' eyes. They see this as a way to aggravate Jews. For others, like William Pierce, he says specifically, we cannot do what we want to do in the United States as long as people believe that these Hitler crimes occurred. And so he says it destroys the white ethic of survival. So for Pierce, Holocaust denial is a strategy to repeat the Holocaust in the United States by denying it in the past. And for some of the movement, that's clearly part of their idea structure.
And the connection to anti-abortion movement?
Well, the anti-abortion movement, as we all know, is dominated by organizations in the Christian right, is dominated by a wing of the Catholic Church, and is not in the main associated with the white nationalist movement. But a number of the killers have had some relationship to the white nationalists. I go back in the book to describe the murder of Dr. Gunn in Pensacola, which was the first of these murders. And the man who incited the shooter, now the shooter is just a regular Joe that's an anti-abortion nutcase. But in the case of the incitement, the person who was leading him, it was a man John Burt, who had been part of the Klan in Florida in the 60s and talked about the fact that he had committed acts of violence in the battles for civil rights in St. Augustine. In the case of Scott Roeder, we know that he put on a, quote, sovereign citizen license plate on his car in the 1996. That was a sign that he was a part of the Freemen. And the sovereign citizen movement was part of the clearly defined racial theory of the Constitution. These people believed, the Freemen, the Posse Comitatus before it, these people believed that there were two classes of citizens in the United States. One were organic sovereigns, or sovereigns, who drew their rights from God, and the rest were 14th Amendment citizens with lesser rights, and this was everybody who wasn't white and Christian. And they were, the so-called 14th Amendment citizens got their rights from the government, where the sovereigns got their rights from God. And so they believed that they could adhere to a set of what they called Christian common laws rather than what they called statutory law in the United States. Roeder was part of that. That indicates to me that when he shot, when he's allegedly shot Dr. Tiller, he was acting out of a complete theology, if you will, a theology that tells him that his citizenship is superior, that abortion is wrong, that women have to obey men, and so forth.
I'd like to ask you about the impact of the Oklahoma City bombing on the white nationalist movement. Clearly, that was the major wake-up call in our lifetime about the dangers of the white nationalist movement within the United States. What impact did in the aftermath of the conviction and execution of Timothy McVeigh, did it have on the rest of the white nationalist movement?
Well, the conviction of Timothy McVeigh was part of a general crackdown by federal government on the shooters and the bombers and the bank robbers in the movement. And as I pointed out earlier, there were several groups. The Aryan Republican Army was active at the same time that Timothy McVeigh was. The so-called Phineas priesthood was. They shot people too. So it was a general round of violence. What happened is the government came in and made major arrests all across the board, and for at least a little while tamped down the most violent wing of the movement. Then came 9/11 and the war against terror. So shooting people was no longer considered by the whiteists, if you will, a useful strategy. I think now that we're 8 years away from the 9/11 events, what we're going to see is an increase, but it's related to the fact